The French chef is made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation and a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated.
Bet you don't know what this is. It's a whole deep-sea Atlantic scallop in its shell. This may be the first time you've ever seen a whole scallop in its shell, but we're doing them today when we do Coquilles Saint-Jacques on the French chef. Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. These are whole deep-sea Atlantic scallops, which were living in the Georges, at Georges banks just a little while ago. And here's how to open them. This is a home method. You set them over heat, and in just a few minutes they'll open all by themselves. I think most of us have never even seen a whole live scallop, and a lot of fish men that I know have never seen them either. What we see are these lovely white lumps. And this is only a third of the scallop. This is only what's known as the adductor muscle. It keeps the shell together and opens and closes it like that. And this is only a third of the scallop, and there's a lot more, as you'll see. Now look at these. These come from the Georges banks, which are about 200 miles east of New Bedford, and the New Bedford fishermen go out and get them, and then they shuck them right in their little boats. And they shuck everything overboard, including the shells, but they just put the adductor muscle into ice, and then they rush home to New Bedford, and then that's what we see. But in Europe, whenever you buy a scallop, and also in Australia, you buy the whole scallop in its shell. And there's a lovely part of it, which you're going to see, which is called the coral, or the roe, which is also extremely delicate and delicious to eat. Now this one, you see, is beginning to open. So I'm going to take him off and open him up, and you'll see what's there. If you're one of those fishermen, you'll be able to clean the whole scallop in less than a minute. There you are. There's all that amount in the scallop. I'm going to take this other one off too, and you'll notice that some of them, I think both of these, are light colored scallops. You have two kinds. You have the one that is more colored with a pink piece, and you have another one that's more colored with a white piece. And if you undo the muscle from the bottom of the shell, I'll show you all the rest of the parts of it. You just pull the muscle part off. I'll put that on a clean thing. And then this beautiful object here is the roe. Sometimes it's called the coral or the tongue. And this part is perfectly delicious to eat also. And unfortunately, in this country, most people the fishermen don't save that. But in France, you'd never buy a scallop at all unless you found it had the roe in it too. And then also the nice thing about having the scallop in its shell is that you can use the shell as a gratin dish. And this, you'll notice the difference between the deep sea scallop and the inland scallop. The French scallop that you see has a fluted shell like this one, and the little American bay scallop is only about half as long. But as soon as they get down into the deep sea, they seem to lose their flutings. And now, of course, when we buy scallops, we usually buy them in bulk, these white lumps, in about 1 pound will serve 2 to 3 people, depending on how you're going to serve them. And after you buy them, be sure that when you buy them, you know your fish man very well, or else you ask the market if you can smell them, because they should have a perfectly lovely, sweet, delicious smell. And if they don't smell nice, take them right back. That's the way you can tell whether they're fresh or frozen. And just before you're going to cook them, and you should cook them right away because they're very perishable. If they've been frozen, once they're defrosted, they should be cooked immediately, and fresh ones should be cooked immediately. Be sure to wash them off and drain them, and then how to cut them depends on how you're planning to serve them. You can broil them whole, or you can, if you're going to saute them, you can cut them into what they call quarters. Sometimes this turns out to be 6, they're 8s. And if you're going to simmer them in wine, you must put on your glasses and tell which is the filaments run the long way. And you slice across the filament, in other words, across the grain. So you would cut them up depending on how you were going to cook them. And you also can get these very little tiny scallops that are like this, which are the bay scallops. They're just about the size of scallops that have been cut up. And there are, of course, several ways of cooking scallops. I mean, I'm not a lot more than several. And one of the easiest ways is to saute them. And if you're going to saute them, you want to season them first. And I think also it's best to flour them as well. So we're going to do about 1.5 cups of quartered scallops. Or these could be bay scallops. And then you want to salt and pepper them. There's a little pepper. I've set them on some wax paper because I think this is an easier method. And there's a little salt, and then squish them around a bit and put on a little more salt and pepper. You'll find always with fish that if you season them first, they're going to have a much nicer taste. And then a few drops of lemon juice, I think, are very good to have. Then, just at the last minute, you flour them. You can get them all seasoned before, but don't flour them until just before you're going to saute, because if you do flour them, the flour gets all gummy and gooey. And we're going to do these Coquilles Saint-Jacques sauté à la provencal. And I'm going to saute them in some olive oil. You could use salad oil if you don't like olive oil. And then you flour the scallops. And again, I'm leaving them right on their wax paper, and I'm just going to sprinkle some just plain, ordinary, all-purpose flour on them, and then swish them about on the paper. Then you want to get the extra flour off, and I think one of the easiest ways to do is put them through a sieve. So, just go there through the sieve, and then you shake the flour off. Scallops in French are called Coquilles Saint-Jacques, and that is after the Apostle St. James. Now I think I've got a little too much oil in there, so I'm just going to dump some of it out. I'm not dumping it on the floor. Now be sure that you have your oil very, very hot. And it should be almost smoking, and then into the pan go your scallops. And the great trick about sauteing scallops is that you make sure that the oil is very hot in your pan and that you don't crowd the pan. This is about all that can go into this pan. I'm using one of these no stickums, which I like extremely well for scallops. I think you may find if you're using frozen scallops, you'll find that they start out very nicely in the saute, and then suddenly the juice comes out. And then they don't brown, and I think if you're using frozen scallops, it's a good idea to drop them in boiling water and let the water come back up to the boil, and then drain them and then season them. And I think you'll find in that way that the scallops won't won't exude water. In this case, you see so far they've acted very nicely, and that's because I haven't crowded the pan. And then we're going to have some parsley and some garlic that will go in afterwards, and also some either scallions or shallots. So I'm just cutting off using just the white part of the scallion. I think I should really do that on a cutting board. And these, you can do all of this while you're watching your scallops saute. Then keep tossing them around. Get used to using this method like this, because it's much easier than stirring them around. And also, if you stir them around, you might break the crusty little flour coating that is beginning to form on the scallops, and then the juices will burst into the pan. But the whole trick in any saute is making sure that things brown, and they'll only brown if your heat is hot and your pan isn't crowded. And remember, if you're tossing the pan, keep it right over the heat while you're doing it so that your pan doesn't cool off. And we also have some parsley. I have some chopped parsley here. And we're going to have some garlic, because this is sauté à la provencal. And then these scallops this size probably take 2 to 3 minutes to saute. And then you can tell when they're done by pressing them. And as soon as they've taken on a slight resilience, they are done. And then as soon as that has happened, put in your chopped scallions and mash in your garlic. And then give them another toss or two. And then, just as they're done, you can also add a little bit of butter, which is very nice. This will just enrobe the scallops in a little bit of butter, taking them off heat then and tossing them around, and then toss in a tablespoon or two of chopped parsley, and they are ready to serve. So that, I think, is really one of the quickest and nicest methods of cooking scallops that you can have, and that lovely garlic smell is delicious. But you can do another thing along with the saute if you want to be a little bit more fancy. Here I've got some that have just been sauteed with no seasoning in. And with these you can make a little sauce. And with these you saute them a little bit less. And then as soon as they'd started to brown a little bit and you had the flour on them, then you put in about 2 or 3 tablespoons of chopped scallions. And then again, a little bit of garlic. I've got about 1 clove in there. And then you can cook them in a little bit of white wine. I'm using some dry white vermouth. It's probably about half a cup there. And then they want to simmer for about 5 minutes, and the sauce, the flour, and the liquid will make a very slight thickening of the sauce. And let them simmer over moderate heat for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then you're ready to put them in their shells. Now I've got some ready shells over here. I'm going to do two kinds of scallops gratinade in their shells, so I'll just fill 2 of them. And if you don't happen to have scallop shells, these ones usually are imported because our fishermen don't collect the shells. You can usually get them at your fish market. If you don't, you can get this glass shell, which has the same flutings and makes for a very nice little baking dish. Now we'll see how. And to say that is simmered 2 or 3 minutes, then you want to boil it down a little bit with the cover off so that the sauce will thicken. And then you just put some cheese, they'll go into their shells, and the cheese is on top. I seem to have lost my spoon now. Well, I've got a rubber spatula here. Now this should boil down a little bit so the sauce has thickened slightly. And then you spoon these into buttered shells. The nice thing I think about these sauté recipes are that they're so extremely quick to do. And then put a bit of grated cheese on top, and this, you can do all of this ahead of time. And then you can put them in the broiler when you're ready to serve, and it just takes about 5 or 6 minutes for them to heat up. Put a little bit of melted butter on top so that they'll brown nicely. So there's another way of doing your sauté. And we're now going to do a more classic recipe called Coquilles Saint-Jacques à la parisienne. And in these, the coquilles or scallops are poached in white wine. And we're going to make enough for 6 half-cup shells or a 3-cup baking dish. And we want to have, again, some vermouth or white wine and a little seasoning and some shallots. And we want about 3/4 of a cup of dry white vermouth or white wine, or you can use half vermouth and half water. And then in go these are 2 cups of sliced scallops. And then we want some salt, half a teaspoon of salt. Get used to measuring in your hand. It's a lot quicker than using those little spoons. And then a little bit of white pepper. You want to put the white pepper in. I'm going to move this onto a slower burner here. You want to put white pepper in because you don't want the pepper to speckle. That's about 1/8 of an teaspoon of pepper. And then a bay leaf for flavor. And be sure when you're buying bay leaves to look on the bottle. These should be imported bay leaves. Turkish ones they usually are, because they have a nicer and more delicate flavor. And then if you want to, you can also add mushrooms. A cup or 2 of sliced fresh mushrooms. It doesn't make very much difference in this recipe how much you use. And then, if you happen to have the roe, you see there's that roe, the pink roe, and then we have the white roe. And you can put that in at the same time, and that all will simmer. And also for flavor, you should have a little bit of shallot, about a teaspoonful. And then you let this cook very slowly with the cover on for 5 minutes. And I'm going to put this on a burner that isn't too high and set the timer. And be sure that you use, whenever you're cooking with wine, be sure that you use a non-staining pan. This one happens to be of enameled iron, or use one that is stainless steel with a heavy bottom, because if you don't use this non-staining pan, you find that your wine will turn sort of a grayish color. That wasn't the clock going off, that was just that it was ready to go. And then, after, I have some that have already been simmered long enough, and here they are, already simmered. And you see that it's made a perfectly lovely liquid, and you're going to use the liquid to make your sauce with. And so just strain the scallops and mushrooms out and pour the liquid back into a pan, your same pan, and again make sure that this is a non-staining pan. And I'm going to show you the roe that is already cooked here. See? There it is. And it has a very delicate taste. It tastes very much like the scallop, but it is a little more delicate than the scallop itself. And it's just lovely, and it's a shame that it's thrown away. And now here you reduce your cooking liquid down to about a cup. For this one we had 2 cups of scallops. We want to reduce the liquid down to about a cup. And this is one of the very important parts of French cooking. Always when you have one of these lovely, flavorful cooking liquids, you boil it down, and that concentrates the liquid, and that's what gives you your lovely flavoring to your sauce. And then we're going to make the sauce. And you won't You won't guess what this is. This is our old mother sauce, the velouté, which is going to be enriched and turned into a lovely scallop sauce. And we're going to make about 2 cups. So we want about 3 tablespoons of butter. You probably say, oh, that's old hat. I've seen the velouté hundreds of times before, but if you're doing any kind of cooking, you'll see it hundreds of times again, because that's why they call it a mother sauce, because it's one of the bases of French cooking. Now we had about 3 tablespoons of butter, and we want 4 tablespoons of flour. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think the more cooking that you do, the more you find that cooking really is business of theme and variations. You do the same thing over and over and over again, but you're using different ingredients, so it always tastes differently. And then we're making the flour and butter thickening, or the roux, the R-O-U-X, which just is butter and flour cooked together, and you see it's frothing, and let it froth there for about 2 minutes. And then take it off heat and beat in your hot scallop cooking liquid. All at once that goes in. And this makes a very thick sauce now, so we're going to add some milk to it. Add a little bit of the milk, and then set it over heat and let it come up to the boil, and then keep thinning it down with a little bit of milk. You see how very quickly old mother velouté is made. And that's that secret again, in which you don't have to simmer your sauce for a long time, because you've already cooked your flour in your roux. And let that just come up to the boil. And this now is just a plain velouté sauce, and we're going to turn it into a sauce parisienne by adding egg yolks and cream. And this again, we've done a great deal. You can leave out the egg yolks if you want, but it gives a lovely quality to the sauce and also a beautiful color. And here's some heavy cream going in. As always, you add a little bit of cold liquid to your egg yolks. And then add a little bit of your hot sauce, so that the egg yolks very slowly heat through. And then this goes back into the pan again. And then that comes up to the boil, and that is all there is to that sauce. And of course, these sauces like this, the French cooking, I think some of their most beautiful sauces are made with fish. And usually they all start out this way: mother velouté and eggs and egg yolks and cream. And then their difference depends on what kind of fish and what kind of other things you've cooked with them. And this just comes up to the boil again. And then you want to taste it very carefully for seasoning. That bell was saying that our scallops were done, so I'm taking them off. And I'll taste it very carefully. Very good, but I think it needs a little lemon juice. You usually find with these cream sauces that they do need just a little lemon juice, and that perks them up. And now your sauce is all ready, and you're ready to finish your scallops. See, this is really very quickly made. I think that's one of the wonderful things about scallops, is that you can do everything so quickly. And then you have a really first-class dish that tastes like la haute cuisine. And so here are our scallop shells. And then the 2/3 of the sauce goes into your scallops. Better get out a dish here. And then and here's our little bit of roe. I'm going to save that in this glass scallop dish. So 2/3 of the sauce go into your scallops and mushrooms. And then this goes right into the shells. Then if you happen to have a little piece of roe, you can put that on top. And then you've saved a little bit of your sauce, and that goes on top, right over that lovely little bit of roe. And then a little cheese on top. If you've made any little spillies, clean them off. Now for the cheese. And this is, as usual, grated Swiss cheese. And you always use the grated Swiss because it doesn't have very much flavor, just a very nice nutty quality. And it's used for brownings. You just really need just a little pinch all over. And then, as in the other ones, you want a little bit of butter on top. I always, as usual, have a pan of melted butter because I find it very useful to use. And then when I'm through with it, I just put it into the refrigerator. And now, you see we have these two. These were the sauteed scallops that had the little sauce on them and the cheese. And then these are the coquilles Jacques à la parisienne. These were the ones with the wine sauce on them. Both of them are delicious to eat. Of course, the ones with the wine sauce are quite a bit more rich. And you can get these all done and then put them in the refrigerator until you're ready to bake them or broil them. And if they're in the refrigerator, I think the best thing to do is to put them in a hot oven and let them heat all the way through and brown on the top. But if you're going to do them right away, you would put them in the broiler and let them sit under moderate broiling heat for just a minute or two, or 3 or 4 minutes until they were bubbling through and browned on the top. And then they're ready to serve. And as soon as they're ready to serve, you should serve them because they're not any good if you have reheated them. And I think that these coquilles in their shells are extremely nice as a first course. You could use them, of course you could gratinate them in a great big dish and make it a main course and serve with them rice and green vegetables. And then when you have your sauté à la provencal, like this, with that lovely garlic and herbal flavor, I'm very much in the opinion of the French that it's best to serve them as a separate course with French bread so you're not wasting any flavor. And with the sautéed ones, I would serve a rosé wine. Now, that's really fascinating, having seen whole deep-sea scallops in their shells. You might not have realized that they were shellfish otherwise. And they're just one of our most delicious shellfish, I think. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.